Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm AC, and we are going a completely different direction today. We had a very cool episode with Eric Orris from Foodo Forge. That was awesome. I learned
a ton in that episode. That was fantastic.
It's really sciencey, man. Like it's a lot. But
no, so it's magic.
It's magic. It's also science. It's both science and magic at the same time. That's how you make knives. How do you make knives? Science and magic.
Pretty much.
That's basically that's what it is. Some things are only science. Some things are only magic. Apparently, blacksmithing is both.
Same as making computer parts. Apparently,
yeah, I guess
for some
so.
Stupid reason.
So anyway, this is a different direction. This is the chicken episode. So with all the talk in the news about the high price of eggs, we thought it would be really good just to go over what the process is of planting your own egg seeds and growing your own eggs versus buying them at the store.
And are they like bacon seeds?
They're like bacon. It's like bacon seeds, right? So obviously that's not exactly how this goes down. And if you're already an egg farmer, you probably already know this, but don't turn it off yet, because even if you are a chicken pro, there might be some useful info in here, or at the very least, you can laugh and commiserate as I break down all the mistakes I've made, because you probably made the exact same mistakes while raising chickens. So I will say, chickens for me, they were definitely the gateway drug into animal husbandry. Like first it was chickens, and then it was bees. And then the next thing you know, man, you're making excuses to your friends and family about why you really need a family of Peruvian alpacas manning your outer perimeter. Like this.
See, that's what scares me about this is we're talking gateway to more prepping, more homesteading, more self-reliance.
They are. They're the gateway drug.
I have an addictive personality to begin with. I don't know if I can handle a chicken or two.
Right. No, you can't handle a chicken or two. You'll end up with fucking 10. So, but anyway, yeah.
Quail it is.
That's that. We're going to talk about that too. There's some other stuff besides chickens I think we'll talk about. But I've had chickens personally for maybe a little less than a decade. And I've built a pretty ridiculous chicken fortress. And I'm going to talk about that a little later. But the info in this episode is scalable. So we'll talk about, if you have just a tiny little piece of lawn or a rooftop, you could probably have chickens and you can probably make your own eggs. And if you have a big giant farm, you probably already have chickens. But maybe we'll give you some info on things you just didn't know about, things you can do with, chickens and the chicken coops and all those kinds of things. So before we get started, the very first thing you need to know if you're going to try your hand at poultry cultivation, or aviculturalist, I think is the fancy word for just the plain old chicken farmer. But the first thing to figure out is if it's actually legal in your area to do this.
Yeah, that's something that not a lot of people think about, and it is a really good point. So just so everyone knows, I am not a chicken farmer. I have a pack of dogs with my wife. We have 5 dogs, but no chickens. I have actually fairly limited knowledge on this skill. I know you have chickens. Forrest, who we had on several episodes about vehicle prep, he has chickens, and I've been around his birds. He also has ducks and geese. I just have a very base knowledge of it. I definitely have more of the litigious mindset, and I actually wanted to look this one up myself. So laws regarding raising chickens vary wildly by location, and they can include restrictions on the number of chickens, the coop size, the distance from other structures. They can even have quiet hours, I found. So if you do have a rooster, you need to find a muzzle for it or keep it inside. But some city ordinances are going to determine whether or not you can have any fowl on your property. For example, some local codes they restrict keeping poultry at least 100 feet away from any habitation or human beings, like a church, school, hospital. So it's got to be 100 feet from the house. It's got to be 100 feet from the property line. That's just not going to happen in a lot of areas.
You got to keep chickens away from church.
Yeah, apparently,
You gotta-
something about those blaspheming birds.
Blasphemous birds, man. They got to be away from church. That's crazy.
But a lot of states have laws that apply to chickens and how they're kept. That can include things like space requirements, coop types, sizes, limitations on how many chickens you can keep, and whether or not you have a rooster in your flock, because they are the louder ones. They're always trying to, wake up, ladies, let's go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's always the petty, evil, nonsensical homeowner association. Thank you, HOA. Never doing this again. But most associations like mine, they have nuisance policies that disallow noise up to a certain volume or during certain hours of the day. And it's a pain in the ass. If we had 2 or 3 chickens, the entire neighborhood around us would know it. And since we're talking about an animal that's actually pretty hard to reason with, you can't teach a chicken logic all that well, you may or may not be out of luck. We are just kind of shit out of luck on this one. We're not going to get chickens.
Right. And besides that too, I think, having a pack of dogs also that would surround the chickens, you'd have to have like a pretty sturdy chicken fortress.
We would. The advantage that we would have there is out of our 5, 2 of them are shepherd dogs. One of them is a livestock guardian who, when I took to Tractor Supply and he got to, visit the baby ducks all the way in the back corner, he was just enthralled and like, I want to take that home. And then we've got a husky and a dachshund. So the one that we would really have to watch out for is the dachshund because she's clever as shit when it comes to getting through stuff. That one. Yes.
Yeah.
She would be the one that we'd have to watch out for is the 9.5 pound dog, not the 120
right.
pound.
Yeah, you're right. That's the one. Probably maybe not the shepherd. So you're right, man. That's a big one. Is you need to know first if you can. And I'm lucky enough to live in a very rural area, so the legal aspect, it's just not applicable to me. So that's a plus. But even if you can, the question I think you should ask yourself is if you should. And I think that a lot of people are just, well, it'll make my eggs cheaper, so I should just get chickens right now. And man, if you haven't ever kept animals before, they're not pets. And, you don't want to name them if it's going to make it harder when you lose one. And there's always an ethical question, I think, whether or not, you could put down an animal if you have to. And I can talk about my own personal stories and experiences in a bit, but it is a bit sobering. I think, as preppers, we just think we're these total badasses and we can just murder anybody with their own hair. But honestly, dude, an animal that you raise, even if you raise it from a little baby and then for one reason or another, you've got to slaughter it. And we probably have listeners that are just like, yeah, man, I kill animals all the time and I, bathe in goat blood and all this shit. Maybe, but for me, I'm more of a pragmatic person. I don't like to kill shit unless I have to. And so I think there is kind of an ethical question you have to ask yourself about, do you have what it takes to, put an animal down if you have to?
Yeah, and you're talking about whether or not you could dispatch a wounded or sick animal. And
Sure.
this is one of the core questions. And I loved your reference to Jurassic Park. They were so busy with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think of whether or not they should.
That's exactly right.
But this is definitely a question to ask yourself, especially if you're someone who's lived in the city your whole life. And if you have never hunted, there is a difference between hunting a wild animal that you have no relationship with and are planning on processing and using the meat.
Yep.
Compared to the chicken that you have raised and you let sleep in your bed. Probably shouldn't do that anyways, but there is a moral code about this. And You don't want to kill unless you have to or need to.
Hmm.
Obviously, putting a chicken down isn't like putting your pet down, but you do
Sure.
need to do it in order to get that meat. And the chicken is your tool in that case, your anti-starvation tool. So you have to view it as such. Otherwise, you're going to put yourself into such a mental block status that
Yep.
you're not going to be effective at it. And then you've got a shitload of chickens running around you become the crazy cat lady, but it's just chickens. Um, and some people don't want to clean up a body, especially if a predator got to it.
Yeah.
That's a health hazard to you and the rest of your flock.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, man, like the first time, like it was an owl that took out a chicken, and I'm just like, like quadruple gloving it, and I'm like, oh, I won't touch it. And now it's just like, whatever. You pick it up, you throw it away, you bag it. It is what it is. But yeah, I mean, the first time I did grow up in the city, and making that transition to homesteader, there is some, you don't like to deal with the blood and the guts and the gore and all that kind of stuff. So
I know the one bird that I think I have to throw on the latex gloves for, I can't get my mental block around it, is pigeons, or those
the feathered
uh
rat, the gutter
the
bird.
Eurasian collared doves.
Dude, do you have those too?
Used to in Colorado, and I'd shoot them
Yeah.
off of the roof with a pellet rifle, and then I'd throw on latex gloves and go pick their dirty asses off the ground and
The
shove them in
thing
the
is
trash.
that those are actually, people say that the doves are actually edible. Like, those are the only ones that I leave them out there. I do get a lot of them. They don't ruin a lot of stuff. Like, they don't eat a lot of my fruit, but they're out there. And I always think those are the ones that I'm going to take a pellet gun and turn them into chicken nuggets. Like, that's those collared doves. Is there a problem with those that I didn't know about?
They're super invasive.
Oh,
They
yeah,
knock
100%.
other birds out of their nests, and they're home invaders.
Yeah.
But they were actually picking the gravel or the asphalt off of the shingles and making nests underneath the solar panels. So I had to pick them
Oh,
out before they
weird.
caused a roof leak.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I actually, those are I'm like, doves. I mean, doves, pigeons, those things. I mean, those are like one of the like edible birds. I think about those Eurasian or whatever they are, the collared doves. That, yes, they are invasive. And I think about those are the ones that I'm just letting them do their own thing until I get hungry enough. Like, those are the ones that I can take them out with a pellet gun, and you don't get a lot of meat, right? It's just a couple of chicken nuggets out of them. But the doves are, those are the ones that I'm just letting do their own thing. But what you said, super true about being able to dispatch the animal. So now we know if we should, and we know if we could, but the why. And they definitely aren't cheaper than eggs, man. Like, if you think that you're going to buy a couple of chickens and then make eggs cheaper than you can buy them, even at whatever they are, $7 a dozen or $10 a dozen, it doesn't matter, man. I'm probably into those eggs like $30 a piece at this point. Like, it's just not, it's not cheaper, dude. But you are in control of your own supply chain, so that's pretty rad. And I think that in a long-term kind of grid down SHTF situation, chicken eggs are going to be worth a lot more than they are right now. So yeah, being in charge of that own supply chain, and having those, and the one cool thing is they do last a very long time. I know we talked about this once before, that washed eggs at the supermarket, they have an expiration date of a week or two, and that's probably pretty realistic. It's because they're washed, and that eggshell is a porous surface. So they don't last as long because air can get in there. But if you just take them out of the chicken butt and you leave them on the counter, which I do, man, they'll last for weeks. I mean, they'll last for 6 weeks, not in the fridge, and they're dirty and they're unattractive. They don't look nice like they do at the grocery store. But that coating that comes out of the chicken and stays on the egg, it does preserve the egg. So the eggs do actually, they last a long time, when you get farm fresh eggs. And the biggest benefit is they're like definitely a lot healthier.
Yeah, I actually looked into that when you sent me this, and there's some pretty crazy evidence about how much healthier a free range
Oh
chicken
yeah, for
egg
sure.
is. Because free range and pasture raised eggs are generally considered more nutrition, or they have more nutrition in them than a conventional egg. They have higher levels of vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, those omega-3 fatty acids. But when you look at the breakdown of it, the pasture raised hens having access to a varied diet of like grass and insects and worms and stuff like that, they produce eggs that are richer in all of those vitamins A, D, and E and the omega-3 fatty acids compared to eggs from hens raised on just traditional chicken feed. They also have a lower omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And like Penn State University actually did research on this. They found that the pasture raised hens have lower omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which is more beneficial for overall health. There's something called a carotenoid, which pasture raised eggs also contain more carotenoids, such as lutein and zeaxanthin, if I could pronounce that one.
I don't know what that is.
It's beneficial for eye health. So,
Oh,
like you were thinking, oh, I'll just eat a shitload of carrots and I have night
yeah.
vision.
Yep.
No, you need the lutein and I think it's pronounced zeaxanthin.
Zeaxanthin. So is that what Cyclops from the X-Men ate? It sounds like an X-Men thing.
Cyclops just got bit by a radioactive chicken and he's good.
That's what it is. He got bit by a radioactive chicken. It had radioactive zeaxanthin in it, zeaxanthin 12 or something, and then he has Cyclops vision.
Exactly.
That's got to be it.
And then they do also have lower cholesterol. Some studies suggest that pasture raised eggs have less cholesterol compared to conventional eggs, but it's better for the hens overall because the pasture raised hens or the free range chickens, they have access to the outdoors. They have that natural enrichment. They have a natural diet. They can go and actually run around the yard. They can play games with each other, grow up relatively normal, and they're not just stuck in a cage. And it's going to contribute to their overall health and well-being. So you're going to have a longer living, longer lasting bird.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean there is there are some ethical ethical questions here that we've answered, but yeah. So now you know if you can have them and if you have what it takes to actually deal with them. So now it's like where to start. You've said I want chickens. You passed the first 3 tests there we just gave you, right? So now it's where should you start? Well, ideally you get on like one of those neighborhood like next door apps or a Facebook group or something, and you see if someone's giving away some laying hens or selling a couple of laying hens. That would be pretty cool. A year or 2 ago, honestly, man, I would see those all the time. I'd see them often where somebody was just like, I'm giving away the hens because I've got too many rats or I've got too many mice or I've got too many raccoons coming after them or whatever. And they would just give them away. Now, not so much, man. So you're probably going to have to buy the little baby birds. Obviously, these are called chicks, right? Once they grow up a bit, they're called pullets. So a pullet is a few week old chick. Now there's a ton of different breeds, like all kinds of different chicken breeds. And you kind of have to do some research to figure out what's good for you. I would definitely recommend what they call an auto-sexing breed. And so an auto-sexing breed is one that you can tell at a very early age whether or not they are male or female. Some chickens, the non-auto-sexing ones, you got to wait till they're, months old, 3 months, 4 months old before you know whether or not you have a hen or a rooster. You look at like they have pointier feathers or something. So you got there's some giveaways before they start making rooster noises. But I'm not kidding, man. The first 8 birds that I took home, 4 of them were roosters. And this is all kinds of problems.
I'm sure.
It's all, so first off, and okay, we're going to get a little graphic, I guess. But so in short, the roosters, they're very rapey and it's a problem. You got to get a maybe 1 rooster to 5 or 7 hens, they say, or they will be what's called overmated. And so the roosters, they'll damage the hens. It is not good for them. You can't have that many. And if they don't have like a big enough fucking harem of hens, they will fight each other. You will just inadvertently start a cockfighting ring in your in your backyard. If because they're showing off, there's not enough hens and they're doing dude stuff and they're fighting and they're bloody. It's crazy. I've seen all this happen firsthand. So then it gets worse because here's the other thing is now I've raised these 4 little roosters as babies, and now you got to do something with them. And people do not want to take a rooster. A lot of people don't want to eat a rooster. So now you have to dispatch the rooster. And, in my neighborhood, we often see roosters like on the side of the road. People dump them. And that's not good for
Really?
anybody. Yeah, they dump them. And then, what that does, it draws in coyotes and shit. But all the time, dude, just the other day, my neighbors were totally against having roosters. And now they've got 2 because they found them up at the end of the road and they just couldn't let them die up there. So they took them home and now they've got roosters. So I will admit this, that I had 4 roosters. I couldn't give them away. And this was a ethical conundrum because they were fighting each other. It was bad for them. They were going to get infected. And I didn't have enough hens for that many roosters, so they were getting overmated. So I just kind of went out in the backyard with a shotgun, and the three slowest roosters are no longer with us. Which I raised these things from babies, so I'm out there crying like, I'm sorry, I'm just blasting these dudes.
You
Like, what else
know,
you gonna do?
as long as you had chicken cutlet out of it, they served a purpose.
That's just all I got. It was, you had to have the right amount of rooster to hen ratio. And so you just have to be conscious about that. So we could spend hours talking about, all of the sadness that happens when you have too many roosters. But there's a bunch of different kinds. Like I said, auto-sexing breeds, pretty cool if you're going to get them as little babies. But there's a lot that goes into these different breeds of chickens, whether it's, the biggest difference is, I would say, cold hardiness is a big one. If you're in a colder climate, you got to get a cold hardy chicken. The size, temperament, a little. I mean, they're chickens. They're dumb, but they do have slightly different temperament. Not like dog temperament, but they're, a
And
little bit different temperament.
roosters in general are going to be assholes.
They're gonna be pretty aggressive. Although, like, dude, the rooster I have now, he'll eat out of my hand. I mean, he won't come at me, but the roosters for the most part are a little more aggressive for sure. Some of the other things to take into account is like egg color and egg frequency. So there's like Easter eggers. There are chickens that lay blue and green eggs, which is just kind of cool. I have one. They're supposed to be green, but the eggs come out gray. And the first couple of times, I thought it was like a problem, like bad eggs, but it's just the bloom, like the amount of calcium in their diet is high, and so this green egg now comes out a gray color. It looks so weird, and people are like, are those duck eggs? Nope, those are chickens. But there's a couple of breeds. There's the black Australorp is a good one. They're calm. They're a calm chicken. They're super friendly. So if you got kids that want to like go feed chickens, they're pretty chill. And they're cold hardy, and they lay eggs pretty well, but they're not like one that just cranks out eggs. The Delaware is another really good one that's like a large breed, and it lays this really brown egg, and they do pretty well in cold weather. Then you get into like Leghorns, which are kind of like that's the Honda Accord of chickens. That's the one that all the ones you kind of see usually are. They're a large breed. They're known for laying eggs. They lay a white egg and they crank them out like 320 a year at their peak, which is a bunch, like
That's
almost an
almost
egg a
an egg a day.
almost an egg a day. They're cranking them out. So that's kind of your typical, I want backyard chickens. I want an egg every day, that kind of stuff. Rhode Island Reds are a good one. They're a good egg layer. And then the other ones, like there's some Sussex and Plymouth Rock. They're both like in the 260, 280 a year, make really good free range chickens. And then one thing that I think a lot of people don't know is that for non-chicken people, most breeds are either an egg bird or a meat bird. There's a couple of breeds that are good for both, that you can have. They're a decent meat bird and also an egg bird, but for the most part, it's one or the other. So we're talking about eggs pretty much in this episode, but there are some that are good for uh, meat production and egg laying. Like it's the Wyandotte is one, and that's a good dual purpose breed. They're good for both egg production and meat production. But for the most part, I think people don't realize that you're gonna get an egg bird, and you're probably not gonna want to. You're not going to eat those. And if you think you can just breed chickens like these egg breeds, you're probably just gonna like have a lot of like chicken broth and shit like that. You're if you look at one of these chickens, if you pull all the feathers off of these, they are so small in there. There's basically the two chicken breasts are basically chicken nuggets. I mean, that's it. That's all you're gonna get out of that whole chicken. They're so tiny. So you're gonna be making a lot of soup. And that's about all they're good for. And the chicken that you get like with fast food or the chicken you get at the supermarket, those chickens, they're not particularly old. So, chickens are going to be in the 4 to 6 month old before they even start laying eggs. So you're probably not going to take a bird that's been laying eggs for a long time and then, oh, they're slowing down, I'm going to eat that one. Dude, you just wouldn't do that. I mean, I've been to parts of the world where you do that, but no, you just wouldn't.
Yeah, and meat chickens are ugly. A lot of them
They're
have been
ugly.
so selectively bred
Yep.
that
And they're
they
big.
they're
They're,
yeah, they're 10-pound birds and they can't run, they have no cardio. They're,
yep.
you
Yeah,
know,
they have no cardio. Dude, it's funny. I was down a rooster. My rooster got killed or taken out. I forget what it is. I've cycled out a lot of birds, but I wanted to have a rooster. And a friend of mine had meat birds, and she goes, "Yeah, if you want to buy one, I've got meat birds, but I could get you a rooster." And I took this guy home, and he was so big he couldn't like get up on the roost, like in the coop. He just slept on the floor because he couldn't get up there. Like they're just these big, massive gym bro of a chicken, and they can't. They're just
yeah,
made for meat.
absolutely. And
So
they don't really lay eggs all that often
no, a
because
meat bird doesn't. No, no.
that's
Yeah,
not their purpose.
right. So the one I had was obviously a rooster, but yeah, I ended up putting him on Craigslist, and some guy came and got him and was like, "Oh man, he's beautiful. I can't wait to get him home in time for dinner." And I was like, "Oh well, at least he'll be the guest at dinner." So I felt kind of bad about
I
that,
mean,
but
he's going to be fresh.
he's gonna be, yeah, exactly. So the simplest setup, right, is like the backyard setup. You can get these on Amazon, like a 2 hen coop. And this is where I actually started. These will run you, maybe 150 to 200 bucks on Amazon. And they're pretty slick. It's kind of the best way to start. There's a few different styles, but basically it consists of this brooding area, which is the box where the chickens actually lay the eggs, and then a little room with a roosting area where they sleep like on a perch. But they're not really perched above anything in these. They just are upstairs in this little box, and they're on these little perches. But then it has like a slidey out little tray that you dump all the chicken poop out of and your shavings and all that kind of stuff. And then a downstairs area where it's opened up onto the ground where they can hang out and forage and eat. And this is kind of the perfect starter setup. I would never get less than two. You got to have a couple because they're kind of social animals. They'd be super sad. So get 2 hens, and you could do that in one of these little things. And it's kind of the perfect starter setup because it has all of the elements of the larger coop. There's like the little place where they sleep and the little place where they lay eggs, and then this little downstairs area where they can forage, and it's mostly protected from predators. It's just kind of a scaled down version. I'll post a couple of links of these kind of things, but they're all sort of the same, and it's a pretty cool setup. And you can literally have those anywhere.
I like how it is scalable because that's something that we have learned about every single one of these episodes is everything in the prepping world is scalable,
Right.
whether it's your localized emergency or national or global, everything is scalable. So having that mentality around chickens is just another reinforcing step.
100%. And this is like something we do a lot. You and I do this a lot, Chris, where we try to start with the like, here's the basic bitch setup, and then we'll take it to the Gucci level and show you. And yeah, and there's a spot, everywhere in between for that. So, the one cool thing I like about these little setups like this is they're totally all enclosed. So it mostly protects from predators. And, those are kind of the wild card because if something wants in badly enough, it's going to get in. And, here's the pro tip for these kinds of setups. I really like this is that since chickens, they will absolutely destroy any piece of grass they encounter. Like if you leave them on a piece of grass, it's gone. They will destroy it. And so the new cool thing that a lot of people are doing with both small setups like this and massive backyard setups and big actually chicken farms are doing this now is they'll basically reinforce the bottom of this thing and put a couple 2x4s and put wheels on it. And so it's still totally in contact with the ground. You can't get under, the chickens can't get out, predators can't really get in. So you've just got, a little tiny bit of ground clearance. Like this is like the, 64 Impala lowrider of the chicken coop world. And it's got just little wheels on it. And then what you can do is you can push this thing around this little chicken lowrider coop, and you can get them on untouched pieces of ground, and that encourages foraging, and it gets them all those natural nutrient shit you were talking about. So they more worms, more grass, all that kind of stuff. You get to feed them a little less. They get in contact with bugs a little more. So it's a very cool thing, and you should check this out. These big industrial like chicken farm, big egg production places are doing this now, where they've got this massive structure on wheels and it just rolls slowly across an area.
Yeah, they're called chicken tractors, right?
Chicken tractors, that's exactly right. And dude, there'll be maybe, I don't know, 50,000 little birds in this giant rolling chicken coop, and then they'll roll very slowly, or they'll leave them there and then roll them all at once. But if they move slowly enough, the chickens won't get ran over, and they just constantly move slowly down these big pastures. And so the chickens, they eat all the grass, all the bugs, all the shit, and then they leave their chicken poop behind, and then that fertilizes the ground behind them. It's actually this very cool renewable thing, and you can do this on this small scale with these little mini, chicken coops. It's pretty cool. So that's really something to look into. If you don't have like a ton of backyard space to make for them, you can just take your, these little things. The footprint on this is probably, it's 2 by 4 feet or something, like the foot, and it's 2 stories. So the chickens go upstairs to lay their eggs and sleep, and then the downstairs, this little, let's call it an 8 square foot area that they live on during the day and forage. And so you can just roll this around. If you have just a little 30-foot backyard, you could move this every few weeks and introduce the chickens to new grass and the worms and all the foraging stuff. So it's a very cool idea, and you're seeing a lot of people do that on the large scale with the chicken tractor. Now, the downside to this setup is they're basically made for 2 chickens. So depending on the type of chicken and the season, and the food that you're supplementing with, that might be, let's say, 10 eggs a week, like on average during the prime of their little chicken egg laying life. Some chickens do lay, like we talked about an egg a day in their prime. I would say I would not recommend just one chicken, because they would get lonely, and a happy chicken does actually lay more eggs, believe it or not. So they're pretty social animals, hence the flock, right? So,
Okay. Makes sense.
I also would not recommend a rooster in one of these kinds of setups with a single hen. If you're trying to make baby chicks, a rooster needs a flock of chickens. If he doesn't have, like I said, 5 to 7, then they could get overmated. The hens could get injured. So now there are bigger setups like this that are kind of fully enclosed, but the more you keep them cooped up, chicken pun right there.
Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, right. So, the less productive they're going to be, because a happy chicken is actually productive chicken. Chickens would not do well in like communist Russia. I don't think they need to be.
Probably not, because all of the eggs belong to them.
Right, exactly. I don't want one leg today, but so the other thing is though, you're gonna have to clean them up and maintain them. The more chickens, the more chicken poop and all that kind of stuff. If you want more than, say, 3 to 4 laying hens, the best thing to do is build them a coop with a grazing area or let them kind of free range during the day. Now, you actually don't need to like keep chickens in this enclosed area if you don't have like major predator problems, because they'll run around on their own, they'll forage, they'll do all that stuff. They have zero respect for borders and fences, but they will come home to roost. Chicken pun. So
Number two.
number two, so they will actually come back to the coop at dusk every single night on their own, usually, unless they found somebody else somewhere else they want to like sleep in legs and shit. But they will come home every night. And then all you really have to do is simply close the door behind them to keep them safe. And roosters, dude, they'll actually usually, like my rooster, he's the first one out in the morning, comes out, puffs his chest out, looks around, makes sure everything's cool, and then he's the last one in at night. The hens all go in, and he kind of like follows him in. So yeah, they will actually come home. They'll come home on their own every night.
Well, that's kind
So
of cool because I mean, you don't have to worry about them as long as they're not getting picked off by
right,
predators or things
yep,
like that. That makes sense.
100%. They will get into your stuff, right? I mean, they'll eat anything, dude. I had did a little insulation thing for my beehive, and it's made out of like that rigid foam core insulation stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and the part of that styrofoamy shit that the chickens could get to, they just ate it. They will just get up there and just pick away at it. So they're stupid animals. Like they're not super bright, but they do some cool stuff, like coming home every night. So so why do people get all creative with coops and netting and enclosed fence areas, etc.? It's really just to protect them from the predators and to keep them out of areas that you don't want them, like the neighbor's dog's mouth, So,
Or your dog's mouth. I will
or your
say,
dog's, yeah,
if you do have a cat or if you do have a dog or a pack like we do,
yep,
make sure that you are introducing them as a family member and not a food source.
yeah. Depends on the kind of dog, right? Like it's funny. I've had two red healers. The last dog, if she could get at a chicken every time, murder every time. This dog, also a red healer, same kind of dog, and he's just chill. He's like, I guess those are like part of the pack. I should probably not eat them. Maybe like he'll kind of hurt them, like he'll put them where he wants them, but he wouldn't he wouldn't kill them. I don't know. It's just dogs are just like people. So yeah, if you've got dogs that are good around chickens, that would be really cool. So um my setup is very elaborate, and I'm gonna post some photos and videos and stuff. I think we could do a little video thing because my setup is very elaborate. Um, so maybe we'll do some cool stuff. And I would say mine is it's on the extreme as far as security and functionality. So you could scale your chicken operation anywhere between kind of what I have and the little 2 hen Amazon coop that I described earlier. I have a coop. It's pretty good size. I've got like 6 brood boxes where they'll go up and lay their eggs, and it's a big enough coop for I could probably have over a dozen hens. I've about half a dozen right now. I could have double that easy right now. And they kind of go into this little sort of covered area, so they can still go outside in the snow, and then it opens up into a larger area, maybe like a 30 by 30 area with high fences and a gate. But I let them out of this 30 by 30 area like daily during the non-gardening season. And
Okay.
the thing is, I mean, it's in my garden area. They're awesome, but they will just jump right into the raised beds. They will eat everything you don't want them to. So, you know, they forage a lot. They'll do it all on their own. So when I don't have a garden going, I let them into that area and they'll do their own thing. But during the summer, I kind of just leave them in this little 30 by 30 area, and they don't really get out a whole lot, but it's a big enough area. I put spikes on the top of the fence just to keep stuff from climbing over. And so the only thing I really don't have is netting over the top. I see a lot of people do that. So they're still at risk from birds of prey, which is a big one. And I have lost chickens to birds of prey, but really that's only an issue at night. If they're going into the coop every night, it's not going to be an issue. And so if they're smart enough to go in at night, there's not going to be any issues. They won't get eaten by the owls usually. So the security of your coop and all this extra fencing and berries and all that really depends on what kind of predators you have in your area, whether it's raccoons or possums or skunks or birds of prey, things like that. And it's interesting. You can look up online depending on how you find your little dead chicken body, you can usually tell what ate them, which is kind of crazy. Like, you know,
I've seen some carcasses that have been absolutely shredded by coyotes, and
it's weird. Raccoons also will do that, like the shred them apart. Coyotes will take them, raccoons will leave them. So that's the big one. The attack looks the same. They tear them apart. Coyotes take them away. Raccoons leave them, come back and eat them later. Like, that's typical raccoon.
yep.
Possums kind of just go for the rear end and pull it out that way. Super gross. And birds of prey lots of times will just only eat the head and just leave them headless, believe it or not. So you can kind of look at the way they were murdered and kind of Keith Morrison and you're like, oh, it was murder,
You can
and
start your own murder podcast.
yeah, your little chicken murder podcast. So anyway, so now let's talk a little about the cleaning part of it. You got to put wood chips like shavings down for them because they are defecating and urinating in here. So there's a lot that goes into this too. Cedar, kind of arguably the best because it naturally repels a lot of pests and it smells pretty good, right? We know, like, all of our friends that do like the composting toilet or the the camping toilet use cedar chips, right? Because it smells good when you put it on poop, right?
Yep.
That
Yep.
makes sense.
Absolutely.
But here's the issue with cedar is that it's very acidic. So if you want to use that in your garden, you have to be conscious of that. Remember,
Oh, so you can't just recycle everything.
right, as preppers, we are always looking for that versatility and that commonality across platforms, right? So using the chicken poop on your garden, super awesome. But if you're going to use more acidic wood chips like the cedars, then that's going to be better around plants that have that are good with high acidity in the soil. Rhododendrons are one, blueberries. So if I'm using cedar chips, I can put that stuff around the blueberries. I generally stick with like a white pine or a fir because they're a little less acidic. They still smell pretty good, and you can use it all over the garden. So you can till that into your raised bed stuff.
And that makes sense. I actually know somebody who grows orchids, and
Mhm.
she uses her chicken poop with cedar in her orchid beds, and they're always huge. But orchids love acid.
They're better with an acidic soil, exactly. So you have to be conscious of that, of if you're going to, because cedar is kind of the go-to. You would think, oh, it smells way better. Obviously, 100% agree with you. But cedar is one of the most acidic of those softwood wood chips and shavings. So if you're going to go that route, you just have to be cognizant of what you're putting on the garden later. And you want to be able to reuse that, especially in like a long-term grid down SHTF situation. That chicken, the chicken poop in that setup is going to like help you grow the rest of your food. And so you've got to just be conscious of what kind of chips you're using for that. So that's a big one to
It's
think
very
about.
interesting.
Yeah. Now, so yeah, I guess chickens are kind of like blacksmithing where they are also science and magic.
Yes,
So
they are.
now food, what do you feed them? Chickens, they like being free range. There are basically two types of feed. There's like a protein crumble or a pellet, and you don't know what's in that. It's just a little crude protein pellet crumble thing. And then there's chicken scratch, which is basically like a bunch of cracked corn and seeds. And you'll notice that their taste for one or the other changes a bit seasonally because when it's like high protein season, they will eat a lot more of the protein stuff. And sometimes of the year, they're like, nah, I'm a carb girl today. Like it just depends. Like in the winter, they will actually go. I found they'll go for a lot more of the chicken scratch rather than the crude protein stuff. And right now, because they're ramping up and it's like time to get into summer and start laying eggs, they'll eat a lot more protein. Believe it or not, kind of crazy.
Well, and
So
that makes sense because every once in a while, I mean, I'm a cheeseburger and pizza kind of guy. I'll chow down on a steak, but every once in a while, I want the Caesar salad, no croutons.
it's exactly the same way. So it depends on whether you're molting, blowing your coat, you're taking your feathers off, and laying eggs. Chris, yes, that's exactly right. So one thing to note, dude. they'll eat anything. And I talked about this a little earlier. They will eat anything given the chance. So I told you the story about the bee insulation, dude. They'll eat anything, but they will eat like table scraps, and they'll eat pretty much everything. There's a list of stuff you shouldn't feed chickens, but it's very, very short. They will eat almost anything. Not, not a ton of bread, not a ton of carbs, stuff like that isn't great. You do have to supplement calcium every once in a while. So I buy like the crushed oyster shells and throw them in there, and that will supplement the calcium to make their shells a little tougher. And this is funny. Like you'll notice the first time you crack like a farm fresh egg, dude, it's like you feel like you hit the thing with a hammer. Like a store-bought egg, it's like they crack very easily. A farm fresh egg, they're like, I swear that shell is 3 times thicker. It's crazy.
You've got
It's
to
like
actually wail on it to
you
get it
got
to
to
open
go
up.
after it. Yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah, they will eat just about anything. Now, think about this. In SHTF, if you're going to be the long-term chicken farmer, what are you gonna feed them then? They love the worms, they love the grass. This is a funny one for you. So chickens, if you just only fed them worms, right? Earthworms. Go dig up earthworms, feed them. A chicken can they'll eat about 60 worms a day given the opportunity, which is quite a bit. So the math there, the ratio of worms to chicken eggs, we could actually figure that out. If you've got a 300 egg a year layer, and you've got a chicken that can eat like 60-ish worms a day, you can kind of figure out, I think it's about 75 worms per egg.
It's
a bunch.
That becomes cost prohibitive
It
after a while if
does.
you're only feeding them worms.
Right. So think about that what are you going to feed them in the SHTF? So yeah, that's the game. They will eat just stuff they find outside, but think about it. They're cranking out a lot of food. So they do take in a lot of food. And if you don't have access to that chicken scratch and things like that, you got to think about where you're going to feed them. Like I said, they like to forage, let them forage. And health issues is something I guess we should probably touch on a little bit. Mites and fleas, they get that kind of stuff. The stick tight flea specifically, that can cause irritation. The chickens, they can get all kinds of different ailments, but mites are one that you might get. You'll see them kind of start to pick off their feathers sometimes. If they get super infested, they do make some really good natural sprays. Have those on hand, and you can just spray them. But they're pretty hardy. I mean, they you don't need to take care of them like you do a pet. They can usually take it themselves. Now,
I would say if you are going to have any type of fowl, whether it's chickens, ducks, geese, quail, whatever, if you're going to do it, go ahead and invest in a contingency medical antibiotic kit.
100%. Yeah, you can get stuff from them. That's exactly right. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing, that's a great point, that a lot, I've got, friends, family come over with the kids, and the kids want to like hold the chickens because they're cool. I get that. But yeah, you got to make sure they're like washing their hands, because there are things you can get. They're just wild poultry
and you
animals.
get a discount by using our code.
You
If
do.
you're going to look at chickens, I mean, you might want to look at one of the higher end kits, not just the basic
Have some antibiotics in
travel
hand.
kit.
Not a bad idea. That's exactly right. Yeah, you can get stuff from chickens. That's exactly right. You hear about all these avian related illnesses out there. So there are things like that. You can get things from the chickens. I wanted to talk a little bit about roosters, like why to have one. Like, dude, they do protect the flock a little bit, and they do boost egg production. Actually, having a rooster around, they do boost egg production. And they do protect the flock, like I talked about, but a little bit. Probably not the way that you think. They are still just a bird. They're like the Napoleon Dynamite bird, right? Like, they have sharp talons. Do the roosters have sharp talons? But they do their best to kind of get the girls in and out of the coop, like I talked about, but they're not really good at anything else besides just alerting what's going on. They'll crow in the middle of the night if there's trouble. Like, I had one in the middle of the night, and he's doing his little cock-a-doodle thing in the middle of the night. I'm like, what is that? Go out, there's a skunk in the coop, and that's exactly what it was. So Anyway, and I lit that dude up. I put a number of 9mm in that, and I still smell like skunk. That was like a year ago. So you just have to be
Gross.
You gotta be, it was so gross. You get prepared for that kind of shit. But think of a rooster. Uh, it- to think of him as a flock protector, it's kind of like thinking of the cops, like they're gonna, stop the bad guy who's already in your home. The rooster, he's gonna show up afterwards. He's gonna make a bunch of noise. He'll comfort you throughout the ordeal, and he'll take a report. But that's kind of it, like that's
So
they're
if I'm getting this right, roosters are kind of like the traditional, uh, you know, New York City walking street pimp, where they've got their harem that's
they
following
do.
them, but
Yes.
when it comes time to do shit, they're not actually going to do anything about it.
Dude, that's exactly right. 100%. They don't protect as much as you used to think. And they are loud. If you want to make baby chicks, obviously the rooster kind of prerequisite there. But but then you really need to commit to like grabbing your eggs every day or so. Otherwise, well, you may crack an egg, and dude, you're never going to want to eat eggs again if you crack one open and it's a little partially gestated chicken in there. It's like the grossest thing ever. So you know, uh, you do need broody chickens to make eggs too. Like you need a chicken that wants to make eggs, and there's this kind of a season for that, and it'll take about 3 weeks for a fertilized egg to hatch. So I've tried, and I'd say maybe 1 out of every 10 will actually hatch and live. The last time I did it, we had 10 that I think were fertilized. 5 of them hatched. 4 of them died almost immediately. Like they they're just like they're all kind of inbred, dude. They're not really good at living. So it's kind of tough to make them just in the wild. Now people that do it, they have little egg incubators and they're on top of these things. They usually don't just let them sit under the chicken's butt and let the chicken do it. They do it on their own. They help nature out a little bit. One thing I do want to talk about, this is interesting, is like the lights and heat lamps. And there are people that go both ways on this, is the lights and the timer stuff. So the chickens molt every year. It's a natural process, kind of blowing the dog's coat. So every year they kind of change out their feathers. And when they do that, it's because they're preparing for winter. And this can cause like the temporary reduction in egg production. So they'll lay less eggs. And that's where lights come in. What a lot of people do is they'll put a little light on a timer in there. And this is kind of controversial because making the chickens think that it's always summer or it's just never fall and winter means that they never really have a break, right? They're always pushing out eggs. And people will say that, it's hard on the chicken and that's not what would happen in nature. And personally, I kind of go both ways on this. I have a light set up, but I don't have it engaged. It's in there. I have a little solar thing. I have a battery. I have a timer. It's got a little charge controller with a USB so they can charge little chicken cell phones. And like I always say, like I have like the homestead and hot storage, right? So I generally have enough eggs to kind of get through the slow season. And I usually just sort of squeak by with enough, and then they start laying again, and it works out. So I don't need to use the light setup. But like I said, homestead and hot storage, I have it available. And if I needed to do that and have them have the lights on all year and, make them think it's not winter and have them laying eggs, I could do that. But a lot of people have an issue with that. I totally get that. But as for it not being natural, here's my issue, is that nothing about the chicken we know and love is natural. The entire animal was made the fuck up through like genetic modification and selective breeding. So while
100%.
100%, the modern egg-laying chicken that we know with their high egg production, like I just talked about, the wild ancestor, what's called the red jungle fowl, it naturally lays 10 to 15 eggs a year, not the hundreds that the domesticated chickens lay. So you see where I'm going? Like, I kind of go both ways on that. Like, I get that it's not natural to just want them to crank out eggs. And yeah, it probably isn't the best quality of life. And yeah, they probably don't live as long. But at the same time, to say that, like, when people are like, just let nature take its course, dude, nothing about this animal is
Those
natural.
chickens are not going to survive. If you let nature take its course, they just became chicken cutlets and chicken nuggies for everything else out there.
Right, exactly. So, it's funny. I did throw a couple chicken terms in here. Have you ever heard the term "madder than a wet hen"?
I have. My
Yeah, and it's kind
grandmother
of
used to say it all the time.
it's weird, right? So this is where this comes from, is that the chickens, when they want to have eggs, it's called broody. So it's actually like a body temp thing. Their body temp warms up and they want to just sit on the eggs and make little babies. And they get mad when you try and then you have to go steal the eggs every day. Like for the most part, my chickens, they lay an egg, they get off, they leave it. And that egg will never become a chicken, even though I have a rooster and it's probably fertilized. Because the second the temperature on that thing drops below, whatever it is, 90 degrees or something, it's not going to ever become a chicken. But when they get broody, meaning they want to have babies and they get warm, they sit on them. So the way to fix them, the way to make a hen not broody, is you just dunk them in water, and it brings their body temp down, and then they're not broody. They don't have babies anymore, and they're cool. But
Interesting.
they are mad as fuck if you dump a hen in water. It makes this blood curdling sound you've never heard a chicken make before, and it's just they are madder than a wet hen.
I would be pissed too if I went
Right.
over to your house and you waterboarded me.
Right. But think about it. It's not just that. It's the fact that it's that they're really, really warm at the time too, right? It's like you're just taking like you're getting out of the hot tub and you dunk somebody in ice water. It's like that. So yeah, they lose their fucking mind. So and then there's the pecking order thing. That's a real term, where you actually there is a pecking order. When you look at them, they rank themselves out.
Which that's where we got the modern term, alpha personality.
Yeah.
It was attributed to wolves and stuff like that. That's bullshit. It goes to chickens, and whoever was the top rooster was the pecking chief.
That's exactly right. And here's something else that's super weird is if you don't have a rooster, there will always be a hen on top that's like takes on the role. Like there will be a hen that's top of the food chain and takes care of everybody else. Like
they're very good at setting up a social hierarchy in short order.
they do that on their own. So, lastly, I think we did want to talk about the other fowl, the other things you can have. Ducks are a good one. You talked a little bit about ducks, and I've had a couple friends with ducks, muskogees, and gosh, I can't remember what the other one is that my cousin had, but a couple things. Ducks can fly. So if you want to have ducks, you have to either trim the wings, clip the wings. And that doesn't actually mean like clip a piece of the wing off. You just clip the feathers, and then they can't fly. Pinioning is where you actually like take a piece of the wing off. That's kind of gross because it hurts and it's bloody. But you can't do it to both, because if you pinion both the wings, they will teach themselves to fly again. So you just have to pinion one, and then they will take off.
And I know some people who have ducks as well. I don't think any of theirs are clipped or pinioned.
Then they
I
may be
think
runners. There's a kind of, like runners. There's ducks that don't fly.
they can fly. I think they know that that's home.
They just want to be there.
And my old truck topper serves as their
Duck
get
house.
under
Yeah.
shelters, because it's all fiberglass. It's got a window to let sunlight in
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But Forrest actually has ducks,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he uses a goose as his quote unquote rooster because it's Fred the guard goose who chases
Dude,
off the neighbor's chihuahua all the time.
you know what? That's a really good point, is that now the one thing I will say about ducks is they do need water. Like they need enough water to swim in and dunk their little noses, and they need more water than chickens. But the goose as the rooster is actually like a great hack. I've got friends that have a pair of geese, a male and a female goose, and they are the roosters, and they are better than my rooster. Like they're keeping an eye on them. They're a lot more aggressive. They will actually go after stuff, unlike a rooster. And this is a funny little animal husbandry lesson here that you'll love, is that geese, because you may not want them to mate and make big goose eggs and little baby geese, is most of those larger breeds of geese, they actually need water in order to procreate. Like they need enough water to submerge the female, or they can't procreate.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those geese, they won't, you can have two geese, you have a pair of geese, and they won't be able to make baby geese unless they have deep enough water to submerge the female. Now, smaller breeds, I think they can, but the larger breeds, like the traditional big goose that you see, they can't do it. It's got to be, they have to have enough water. Isn't
We've
that
got
weird?
some Canadian geese that like the pond right across the street from us, and I'm pretty sure our neighbors across the street have Canadian goose eggs in their backyard and don't know it.
Really? I've had duck egg, and it, like people say, it's rich. It's very rich, and that's true. I don't know what a goose egg would take. I mean, I imagine you eat them, right?
I have no idea. I don't think I've ever had one. The only term I know for goose egg is zero. I know
That's right.
I've had
Yeah.
quail eggs, and those are really good. They're a lot smaller, but they taste a lot like chicken eggs.
Yeah, quail are a good one. I've had quail egg, and that's like a way to kind of get around the laws too, right?
It is because a lot of the time, especially with local laws, quails are so small and so much quieter than chickens or even ducks that they get forgotten in the legislation. So you can't have chickens, but there is absolutely nothing that says you can't have quails. And they don't eat as much, so you can have more in a smaller area. They're not as big. You're not going to get, I mean, if you get meat off of quail, it's going to be that one
It's the
chicken
chicken
tender.
nugget. Yeah,
And
right.
the eggs are a lot smaller. I mean, if your normal chicken egg is about the size of a golf ball,
Hmm.
they're going to be about the size of a bubblegum ball,
Yeah,
a gum ball.
yeah. They're tiny. I mean, I've had them like that's the egg you always see like at sushi restaurants, right? Like the tobiko or whatever. Like that's the
Yeah,
egg. It's the little
yeah.
quail egg, right? Yeah. So, yeah, you could do quail. That's actually really cool. I would like to look into that. I wonder how hard quail would be because you're right. They're smaller. It's probably easier. They're not loud. They're tiny. Like that might be
And
the
they
kind
have
of
a
hack.
faster gestational rate. So I think most chickens are what, 3 weeks to hatch,
Right, yeah,
roughly.
from the fertilized egg to the to hatching right around 21 days. Yeah.
I think from if what I read, if I can remember it right, it's like 12 to 15 days for quail.
Oh, no kidding. It's quicker.
So you could have a lot of eggs very quickly if you do your bird math right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how like baking with them works. That's the one thing with ours because, when you go to the store, you get the same size egg. It's that grade A large egg, and I do get eggs that big every once in a while, but not very often. Most of the eggs I get, I would say, are a little smaller than that, you know, grade A standard large size or extra large eggs. I think the most of my eggs are smaller than that. So you end up tweaking your recipes a little bit when it comes to like cooking with or baking with the
Just
farm
like you
fresh
would
eggs.
for high altitude.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's the same guy.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, I know. Yeah, it's the same exact thing. So, yeah, that's pretty much all the stuff I had for chickens. I don't know. Was there anything else I missed? Was there anything going through this, Chris, as a non-chickener that you were like, I have a question about that?
I've learned a lot, and I almost want to try it, but like you said, it's a gateway
Oh,
drug to
yeah,
prepping and homesteading. So I think if we ever do move away into kind of a hot storage homestead like you have, which we would like to do, if we ever do make that a reality, I definitely think birds of some kind, fowl, or um, you know, not just your traditional livestock like
sure.
goats and
Yep.
cattle, because those are expensive and big.
Oh, yeah. No,
But
this is the easy one. This is the gateway one. This is where it starts as chickens.
yeah, quails, chicken, maybe a sheep or two.
Hmm.
I think that's probably where I would want to start. But it does make me happy that I have this to come back to and be like, oh yeah, AC talked to me 10 years ago about fucking mites, and now I've got chickens. They're picking all of their feathers out.
Right. That's exactly
But
right.
I definitely think I have learned a lot. But comment, do you think if you own chickens, what are some of the steps or tips or tricks or hacks that you have in your
Yeah,
toolbox?
I'd love to know any of the hacks we didn't cover. I'm sure there's a bunch, and I'm gonna post some videos of kind of my super chicken fortress too. And this is only because I have had it's the predator issues, man. I have had just Every single predator you can think of that would eat a chicken, yeah, man, they've showed up, and now I don't get that anymore. So I think I've kind of solved the riddle.
Excellent. Well, that is definitely going to wrap us up for this week. Join us next week for the next step in our adventure together. And as always, remember, you are your own stakeholder.